Welcome to Business 4500 Leadership Concepts. Our agenda for these slides is to first welcome and introduce you, which we've already partially done. We're then going to take you on a tour of the syllabus in great detail so that you understand all of your assignments and what you need to do and when you need to do it and how you need to do it. And then we'll end with showing you the next steps you can take to get started in the course. So first, some introductions. My name is Jordan Holtzman, and I'll be your instructor for this course. A little bit about me. I am the Director of Graduate Programs here at NDNU, which oversees the MBA, MPA, and MSM graduate degree programs, both on-ground and online. My background professionally is I've been an academic for the last about 10 years. I've worked at NDNU for the last 6 years. And before I came to NDNU and started in academia, I was in the corporate world, doing various different things such as financial management, such as sales and marketing, such as consulting. I've worked for Fortune 500 companies. I've had my own business. I have run a couple of nonprofits. So I've got an exposure to the public and the private sector in a lot of different facets. And I will bring some of that experience to bear in the course, and you'll see some of that influence in some of the things that I communicate to you on. My first personal philosophy on leadership is that leaders should be enablers. That is to say that a good leader is somebody who brings out the best in their employees, their followers, their colleagues, etc. And that's kind of the new mode of thinking around leadership, where it's no longer the master and servant interacting. It is, if anybody's the servant, it's the leader nowadays. And I believe leaders should really be servants to their followers to sort of reverse the hierarchy. So we'll talk more about that concept in the course. And then you'll get a little bit of my leadership philosophy personally in bits and pieces throughout the course as well. Although, most of the time we'll be talking about the theories and what the theories have to say about what constitutes effective leadership. So just a quick bit on me, and then I'm going to get to learn about you through the postings and the course submissions, and I look forward to that. There are a number of ways to get in touch with me if you need to. You can do it by email. You've got my email address. You've got my smartphone number there. And by the way, I take calls pretty late. If you want to call me up till about midnight, I'll be willing to answer. I work pretty late. And remember, again, we're also here on the West Coast, so we're on Pacific Standard Time. You've got my Skype ID if you want to contact me over Skype. That tends to work very well. We can do a chat over Skype, or we can do a video call, or just an audio call, whatever you like best. The last thing is that the time for the course officially is Thursday nights. That doesn't really mean much of anything as far as meeting. We're not meeting. We are doing everything asynchronously. However, when it comes to submitting things, we will use Thursday 11:55 p.m. as our submission day. So literally every Thursday you'll have something that you're submitting, and you would do it by 11:55 p.m. The reason why it's not 12 midnight is because then it becomes Friday. So we say 11:55 Thursday, and that's the way the Engage platform is programmed to accept things. So there are 3 required materials for this course. 2 of them are books, and another one of them is a movie. Your 2 textbooks here, The Art and Science of Leadership by Nahavandi and The Understanding Behaviors for Effective Leadership by Howell and Costley, are your 2 texts. What you're going to find is that I will base most of my PowerPoint lectures on the first book, and then we'll use the second book to kind of reinforce some of the things you learn in the first book, to add to some of the things you learn in the first book. The second book, as the title implies, is really specifically about leadership behaviors. So it will concentrate on the different realms and modes of leadership behaviors and when they're appropriate, when they're not appropriate, when they work best, when they don't work best, etc. Whereas the first book is, I think, a little bit more well-rounded and has some of the behavioral component, but talks about other issues related to leadership. And so I'm going to key my lectures to the first textbook. You see there in red. And if there's ever a doubt as to which one you should focus on, probably the first one is a little bit more important than the second, but I want to also emphasize that both are important. We want you to read everything. But as you'll see, in the first couple of weeks, the reading load is pretty heavy, and so if you have to pick and choose things to read, I would say go with the Art and Science book before the Understanding Behaviors book, just because the lectures are more tied to that. The third thing that you need for the course, and you don't have to get this right away, you've got some time, is a movie called Enron, the Smartest Guys in the Room. It came out a couple of years ago. Terrific, terrific movie about leadership ethics. Also a fun movie, and it's almost embarrassing to say that a movie about being so unethical could be so fun, but it is, I have to admit. And the point that we're going to take away from it is that unethical things happen in organizations, and what are some of the circumstances behind the development of those unethical practices and environments and cultures. And so that's really what the movie is meant to showcase. It just happens to be about a for-profit Enron, which everybody kind of knows what happened at a general level a few years ago. So anyway, the bottom line for now is, in a few weeks, I'll be reminding you to get that movie. How you get it is up to you. We don't really care. If you want to rent it, buy it from Netflix, or go to your local video store. If you still have one in town, who knows? These days, everything is Netflix. Get it somehow and watch it, and that's going to be the last activity we do in the course. So you have a little bit of time, as I said, but start thinking about it. So let's talk about what we're going to cover in this course. I'll read the course topic paragraph there verbatim. It says, Leadership Concepts surveys the major concepts, examples, practices, and theories of effective organizational leadership, with a special emphasis on analyzing and developing one's own personal leadership skills. So really what you're going to see in this course is a lot of models that attempt to first categorize the different kinds of leadership that are out there, and then B, try to tell you when those types of leadership work well and when they don't work so well. And there's a myriad of different ways you can frame that issue, and so that's really where we spend the bulk of our time. Just kind of quickly to mention, there are a lot of books out there in the popular press that will like to say one leadership style is the right one, or that there's a new paradigm for leadership and it should be this. Okay, so one of the words you hear a lot lately is empowerment, which can be a very good thing, but it can also sometimes be a bad thing depending on what the organizational circumstances are. The point is that we don't really ascribe to any one particular mode of leadership as being the best or the worst. What we're going to say in this course again and again and again is it depends on where you find yourself, where your organization finds itself, and that will dictate the kind of leadership that is needed in that particular situation. So these concepts, examples, practices, and theories all have to do with that. The second piece there that's important, I think, is the developing one's own personal leadership skills. This is a very, very personalized course. You're going to be sending us some thoughts and information about your lives and your management and leadership practices and how you've been led and how you've been a follower. And so we're going to take that and use it to develop and apply some of the knowledge that you're going to gain in this course. And then ultimately the goal is for you to walk out of the course with a better handle on your strengths and weaknesses as a leader, and then of course put together a plan to overcome any leadership weaknesses you may have. Okay, and everybody's got them. I mean, Barack Obama's got plenty, to use him as an example of leadership weaknesses. And some of them you just leave alone, others you try to work on. But then also we want you to reinforce your strengths. There's things that you're good at, We want you to recognize that and keep doing it. Mostly. Sometimes, again, you'll find out that sometimes the strength is not worth exercising. Now, as far as the format of the course, really two major things, and then the movie, which I mentioned before. You will listen to a series of narrated PowerPoints, just like this one. Narrated means, you've got me talking here in the background while you read the slide. So every week you will see something on the order of 2 or 3 of these, and they go by chapter, and they go by the Nahavandi chapters, the Art and Science of Leadership book, which I think there are 10 chapters. So you will see roughly 10 PowerPoints. That's the first thing. Those PowerPoints will emphasize the major points made in Nahavandi. And like I said before, a few slides ago, if you're running short on time and you have to sacrifice some of your reading, especially in the first few weeks where the reading load is a bit heavier, then make sure you get the Nahavandi reading done first, and then you get then you can move on to the other set of reading, which is the Ubfell Howell Costley textbook, because the Nahavandi stuff is what I'm going to cover in these PowerPoints, and it tends to be the things that I think are a little bit more important for the course, actually. The second major thing in the course is the posting exercises, what I'm going to call CRQEs. I'm going to get into that in extensive detail in the rest of this PowerPoint, so I'm going to leave that till later. But basically, this is where you apply everything that you learn, okay? And you apply it to just general leadership thinking, and then also thinking about yourself as a leader, as I mentioned before. And then the movie is something that you get, again, towards the end of the course, and we use it as an example of how to not run an unethical organization or how to run an ethical organization. So more on that later. So here's a slide on the learning outcomes for this course. Some of these I've already touched on, so I'll cover them briefly again here. Like the first one, understanding and applying the major theories, concepts, practices, and applications of leadership knowledge to manage groups and organizations and individuals. Again, there's going to be a lot of talk about when a certain leadership style makes sense, when it doesn't make sense, when you can use substitutes for it, when it gets neutralized, which means that you try and try but nothing happens, or the opposite of what you want happens because something is holding you back. And all of these theories, again, are centered around the idea that there is effective ways to lead and ineffective ways to lead, and so we'll explore all of those theories, which then turn into practices and applications. Bullet point 2, evaluating your own leadership potential. You're going to spend a lot of time doing that in your postings, and I will get into the details around that in a few slides, but we want you to walk out of the course knowing more about yourself as a leader, what your strengths and weaknesses are, how to overcome your weaknesses and reinforce your strengths. And this is the place to share of yourself. Tell us, as much or as little as you want to, but the more you can tell us, and you don't have to tell us every last detail about who you're working with and what projects you're on. If you want to generalize it, that's fine. And just say, at work I encountered this issue, and I'm wondering about the best to overcome this problem at work, or how to best lead my people or manage my people in this particular situation. You can stay generic and general if you'd like, and we like that. But again, trying to develop your skills as a leader personally, because everybody's going to be different, everybody's going to have different needs, and so the beauty of having a small class size, which we keep these classes to under 10, typically, is that we can afford to do that as we communicate with each other. Point 3, I kind of already mentioned, different leadership styles out there. Some of them work, some of them don't, in different situations. We'll talk about that. Bullet point 4, leadership training and development methods. We'll touch on that near the end of the course. How do leaders get trained? Can you train a leader? Sure you can. What programs are out there? What kind of knowledge do I pick up? Is it useful? Does it actually work? We'll talk about those issues later. Ethics is a big piece of the course because it fits with our mission as a school that values social justice and community engagement. They are part of our mission and hallmarks here at NDNU, so we spend almost a full week on just ethical issues and leadership, and that's when we bring in the Enron movie. And so, the goal there is just to give you guidelines as to how to be an ethical leader, which means we spend most of the time talking about situations in which there are ethical lapses in leadership, naturally. The last piece I think is really important. It's the one I'm most excited about in the course, which is that we're always hoping that you're going to be your own theorists and be your own little academics here, meaning that you take all this knowledge that you gain in the course, all the theories that we talk about, and the things that you observe from real life, working with real people, leading and following, and that you develop your own novel perspectives on leadership, practice, and theory. So literally you're developing new ways of thinking about leadership, and you're putting those up on the screen as part of your posting so that we can all kind of learn from your theorizing. Sometimes you'll be right, sometimes you'll be wrong. What matters is that you try to be novel and try to kind of break through the clutter and come up with something new about how to think about the process and practice of leadership, okay? Because just because you read a theory in your textbook or that we discuss it in class doesn't necessarily mean it's right or 100% right. It could be right in some circumstances and wrong in others. And again, you've got experience to bear that you can bring to bear on the whole process here in the course. So that means you can propose your own theories and challenge the common knowledge that's out there. We love that. We like the debate. We want to hear your debate and your new ideas about leadership. So keep them coming, please. The grading for this course is fairly simple. You'll notice below here in the percentage breakouts. The first thing that is readily apparent is that the majority of your grade comes from the CRQEs, which are basically your postings and your assignments, which I'm going to get into on the next few slides. You've got 6 of those, so at 60%, each of those is worth 10%. Then you've got the matter of the midterm and the final, which are each 20%. So, 40% exams, 60% postings and assignments for your 100% of the semester grade. So exams will be taken twice in this course, once during week 4 and again at week 7. The difference between what I'll call the midterm and the final, although I really hesitate to use those terms because final tends to mean something larger than an average exam. Here, your final in week 7 is actually smaller or shorter than the exam in week 4. So what happens is during week 4, the only thing you're going to do is your midterm exam. You will devote the whole week to taking that, and it's a fair number of questions, something on the order of about 130, because it tests material in both of your textbooks, at least halfway through, I think, both texts. Then in week 7, at the end of the course, you'll take the final exam, which will be about half the length of the midterm, and then you'll do it in conjunction with your other assignments. Whereas in week 4, it's the only thing you do. We understand that a test that long needs more time and attention paid to it, so that we minimize or really basically eliminate all other aspects of things that you would have to do that week. What's on the test? The tests are 100% multiple choice questions, and they just are seeking to ascertain whether you understand the concepts in the textbook and which are reinforced in the PowerPoint lectures. And of course, the discussions we'll have and the postings you'll do, that serves as a point of reinforcement. But if you did nothing but read the text and look at the PowerPoints, that would be enough to prep you for the multiple choice questions on the test. And furthermore, going down to the last bullet point, and you'll like this piece of good news here, the tests are not timed. They are open book. Obviously, we can't come to your house and guarantee that you're taking this without the aid of books and notes, but we wouldn't mind anyway, because Whether you learn it through that method or you learn it through memorizing, which is not really a useful skill in this course, one way or another you've learned it. So, hey, great, open book. The only caveat is, you get to submit your answers once. So you go through the test, you pick your A, B, C, and Ds for questions 1 through 130, and then you submit, and that's your set of answers. Okay. My general comment about the exams is they're really not much to worry about if you've done the reading and kept up. And again, what does doing the reading mean? Well, different things for different people. Some people will read selectively during the weeks and then kind of brush up right before the exam or brush up during the exam. You can do that because it's open book and it's on time. Others will just want to have it done completely well before they sit for the exam. So it's really up to you. Whatever works best for you. We don't legislate one method or another. Whatever works best for you is what's allowed. So here's a little sneak preview of what you can expect on the exams, which again are all multiple choice. You'll see the questions are fairly straightforward, and they just tap the things that you're learning in the textbook and the lectures. So here, which of the following is one of the primary reasons leaders fail? And then if you read the chapter on power and corruption, you would see that the answer is B, intimidation and arrogance. You might have actually thought A, but A is not actually one of the factors that the research elucidated as being a primary reason for leaders failing. Now, the other thing I should mention is you can go ahead and look at the tests today if you want. They're online on the Engage platform. They're open. And if you're the type who wants to answer questions week by week, that's fine. Typically, that doesn't happen because you're busy doing the other work and doing the reading actually, so you don't have time to do the test. But you can go ahead and check out the whole thing now if you really want to. But in the meantime, we wanted to give you this little sneak preview to give you a good expectation of what the full exam would look like, which would be another 129 of these kinds of questions for the midterm and another 60 some odd of these kinds of questions for the final. So now we come to the part you've all been waiting for, and the part that I've been certainly waiting to tell you about, these mysterious CRQEs. What are they, and what are we going to do with them in the course? The first thing is that these are the primary way you're going to learn about leadership concepts. And it's really a mode of discussion that you're going to engage in that takes the material and puts it into the real life perspective and lets you apply the concepts you're learning to your real life situations. Every week you will have, except for week 4 when you're just taking your midterm, you will have CRQE sets to do. So, just like we make this the majority of the grade, which is, 60%, the reason for that is because this is literally what you'll spend most of your time doing in the course. So, CRQE stands for critique, reflection, question, and exercise. And so I'm going to take you through what each of these mean over the next few slides. So we start with the critique. The directions here say that you're going to critique any aspect of the material presented in the text, chapters, or the PowerPoint lectures assigned for that week. So let me emphasize at the outset here, you should really try to confine your critique to whatever you will have read for that week in the text. And every week, of course, has its own text assignments. Is it completely taboo to bring something else in from a prior week, or to even kind of look forward and maybe bring something in? No, but we would certainly prefer that you keep it relevant to the week under discussion and analysis, because that's what people will have briefed themselves on, and so therefore it just becomes easier for you really to focus your critique on the thing we're asking you to cover that week. Now, a critique is basically an evaluation of something, and the something here is all the concepts and theories and principles and practices that are described in the text. And there's a lot of them, to be brutally honest. You'll be, these ideas about how to lead and the different names for them and how they differ from each other, that will all be swimming in your head as you accumulate more and more of the reading. And so what you do is you focus in on a piece that appealed to you, either because you totally agreed with it and you thought that you'd seen it work in reality, or maybe you completely disagree with what you're reading and you want to tell us why you disagree and how your thinking about the issue is superior to what you're seeing in the textbook. Let me emphasize at the outset, again, I don't think the text knows everything. I don't think researchers know everything. I don't think academia knows everything about leadership that there is to know. I think they offer a piece of the puzzle, and that piece of the puzzle is at times problematic, and so therefore one of your jobs as a student in this course is to help point out where these models are weak or where they do very, very well, so that we have something to relate these models to and say, hey, yeah, they do really work, and here's why. So really, it's really up to you. You want to agree or disagree, do one or the other, and tell us why, and then tell us, if you're disagreeing, how you might advance another proposition which is superior to the one that is being advanced in the course material. So before I start taking you through how the critiques themselves are graded, let me just make a general comment about all of the grading for all of the CRQEs. For just about everything you're going to submit in your CRQEs, we're going to break your grade into two pieces. One piece will look at the content itself, what I'm calling here the content contribution, and then the other piece of your grade will be the expression, which really reduces down to how well you've written your response. So that's kind of a universal principle for anything that you're going to submit to the Engage platform. So now let's talk specifically about how the critiques are graded. Again, content and expression. What is good content for a critique? Let's go bullet by bullet here. So, thoughtful and thorough reflection of the course material. We want to see that you've done your reading, you've internalized these concepts, and that the critique that you're making reflects your efforts to assimilate the material. Number two, includes insightful arguments and observations and is factually correct. So, we're not going to go out all out and make sure every last thing that you put down is 100% accurate, but every now and then a student might take a shortcut and say something that's just kind of out of left field, and so we're on guard for that, and hopefully you won't do it. But more importantly, are your arguments and critiques insightful? Do they show, again, that you've learned something? Do they incorporate multiple viewpoints and maybe show conflicts among those viewpoints? That's a good way to be insightful. There are many ways to be insightful. That is just one. Insight is something that you know it when you see it, basically, but it really means that you've taken the time to think about the issue and you have some kind of novel perspective about it that could not be gleaned directly from the text or the PowerPoints or any other discussion we've had in the course. Point 3, elucidates practical or theoretical strengths or weaknesses in all the things we're going to talk about, the concepts, the models, perspectives, with real-life examples or examples from the reading. So the key thing there is that elucidating the practical or theoretical strengths or weaknesses. So there's a model out there that will study like the path goal theory or the leader-member exchange theory, and uh, these are theories that were put out there to help solve real problems, meaning to help leaders figure out how to best lead, or help organizations figure out how to choose the best leader for the situation at hand. But every model out there is inherently flawed, and so if you can point out the flaws, or conversely, why this model really works, or why it's better than other models, which I would call a strength, and you can do it with, things that happen to you in real life, or things that you experienced while being a leader or follower, or other examples from the reading. There's going to be tons of them. You're going to look at how different leaders have led, and what they did and what they didn't do, and how it ended up. Use those things to show why these models are meaningful or flawed, or maybe both. You have models that do very well at some things and not so well at others. What we don't really want here is just kind of regurgitating what the text says about this is why this model doesn't work, or why it's weak, or what's so good about it. We want your thoughts as they relate to your personal and professional experiences, for the most part. Okay. Every now and then, again, a practical example from the reading is also good too. Last bullet point: proposes novel leadership perspective, theories, and ways of thinking. So again, from your critique, the resolution of your critique should be: here's the way we should think about leadership and effective leadership. So you fix the flaw, or you highlight the strength and say this is why people should be using this model to make decisions about leadership. Okay, so that's content and contribution. There's a mouthful there, but expression's a lot simpler. It's just, are you posting something that's clear, concise, easy to read, relatively free of grammatical and spelling errors? I mean, I'm not fanatic about it, but there's a difference between having, an I and a T not dotted and crossed respectively, versus something that just doesn't work at all because it's so hard to read that you just want to stop reading it. So the former is okay, the latter not okay. Spend a little bit of time, not too much time, but some time editing what you post before you actually post it, so that the reader has clarity. Because sometimes the reader will be me, sometimes it will be me and the whole entire class, depending on what you're submitting. Okay, and you want to write to your audience in a way that they will easily be able to understand what you're trying to convey. So next up is the reflection. The reflection is a chance for you to take a look at the results of your self-assessment exercises that are assigned for each week, and tell us what you learned about yourself as a result of analyzing these self-assessment outcomes. So every week what you're going to find is you'll have something between 5 and 10 different kinds of personality or values or skills inventories to complete. You'll score them, then you'll relate the score to a rating or a ranking or a classification of yourself on a certain attribute. And then some of the time what happens is you wind up agreeing with what you found. Other times you wind up disagreeing, and you say, hey, I'm not really the person that this test says I am. Either outcome is fine. If you agree, tell us that you agree and tell us why. If you disagree with the outcome, tell us why you disagree. And just a kind of a little bit of a side knowledge here, why might you get an outcome that is different from the one you were expecting? Well, sometimes these tests are very accurate. I shouldn't say sometimes. Just about most of the time, these tests are very accurate, and people may have different perceptions about themselves than the reality of themselves would have them believe. And so these tests are meant to actually expose the reality of who you are, and that may sometimes be at odds with who you are trying to be or who you want to be, and so therefore you see that discrepancy. And that's fine. That's something that you can certainly talk about in your reflection, the main point of the reflection is to figure out the areas that you're strong at and keep doing them, and then figure out where your challenges and weaknesses are, and then put together a plan to overcome those challenges and weaknesses. So if you find that you're weak in a certain area, and it's going to be important to being a good leader, then you'll want to put together a plan to try to improve yourself in those areas. And so part of your reflection posting would constitute doing just that, putting together that plan. And by the way, I need to mention here that this is all private. This is just a conversation between you and I, or you and me, excuse the grammar there, so that your other classmates won't see this. Okay, so the bottom line is if you're not comfortable sharing the information with me, then don't share it. Only share what you're comfortable sharing with me, but also know that nobody else is going to hear the results of your reflection or your plan or any of these things that are discussed in the reflection part of the CRQEs. Okay, so only share what you're comfortable sharing, and I'll just leave it at that. Okay, but again, the main goal here is to find out what you're good at, find out where you need improvement, and then put together a plan for the improvement. And if you've done that, then you'll have a good reflection. The grading on the reflection is fairly straightforward. As far as content goes, if it seems like you are thoroughly and thoughtfully analyzing the results of your self-assessment exercises, showing that you understand what they mean and you can relate them to the course topics, that's going to be helpful in getting a good grade. If you clearly delineate what your strengths and weaknesses are, and use the course concepts and theories and models, as well as your personal and professional life experiences to talk about those strengths and weaknesses and capabilities and needs for improvement, then that's also going to help. And finally, just being specific about those particular things that you need to improve and then coming up with that plan for improvement that seems reasonable and that makes sense is going to be something that we're looking for in these reflections. And if you've done that well, you've got yourself a good reflection. As always, we grade out expression 2, which is the same as every other expression rubric we've shown you so far. The next part of the CRQEs is the question. That's the Q. And in the question part, you're asking literally a question about the material that we're covering that week. And the best kinds of questions to ask are the ones that are open-ended, meaning they don't have simple answers. So if you found a conflict between theories, or you have a situation at work or one that you had in the past that doesn't have an easy and straightforward answer to it, that's probably going to be good material for your question. And so again, what we want to avoid is things that we could just answer in a one-word sentence like a yes or a no or something close to that. That's not really going to stimulate discussion, which is the overall goal of the question. And again, who's going to answer your question, of course, are your classmates. So that's what you need to do with question. I want to draw your attention to the note at the bottom. In blue it says you can ask more than one question. In fact, we encourage you to ask as many as may occur to you, but we will grade them all and take the highest grade as the one that's going to count for your question for the CRQE for that particular week. But when we go back and do final grading, we will note how many times you posted questions and consider that in the grading process as well. But really, what you want to do is focus on having at least one very high quality question, and then others which can be not quite as high quality, but still are good and still stimulate discussion. And of course, we would love it if all of them were super high quality, but we understand that typically it's going to be one great one and some others that are good but not quite as great, and that's fine. So the grading for question won't come as much of a surprise. It pretty much echoes the things that I just mentioned in the last slide. The main goal, again, stimulate discussion and have a thought-provoking question. If you do that, then you get a good grade. If your question starts to identify your understanding of the course material, Even if it's at a basic level, that's a good thing as well. And again, we're looking for your ability to point out conflicts in the models and the theories, and then the ultimate goal there is to try to reconcile those through the questions and answers and the course discussions. The thing that you ask should be substantive, a substantive leadership issue, nothing trivial. Something that's important to leading people in pretty much any organization will qualify as substantive. Excuse me. That's something you just know when you see it, and I'll point out if I think your questions are too basic and too trivial. I'll let you know in my grading. And tied in with that is the last bullet point there. No easy or straightforward answer. Again, that's what's going to stimulate discussion and bring multiple viewpoints to the table. And once again, we'll grade your question on expression, which is the same as every other expression rubric. So if you have a question, of course, you need to have some answers, and that's the next subpart of the question part of the CRQEs. You're going to answer a question posed by your classmate. How do you pick which question to answer? Well, you can pick the one that appeals to you most from a knowledge-based perspective, from an interestingness perspective. Whatever criteria you want to use, you're free to use, as long as you answer at least one question. And then you see down there, again, the note in blue. You could answer more than one question, as many as you like, and we'll count your highest grade, and then I'll also note the frequency of your answering in final grading. When you're answering, again, try to make reference to the concepts and theories and models that we discuss in the course, and then also you do that in the context of drawing upon your own life experiences and your own perspectives, which is a powerful combination. If you can cite theory and research, and then also talk about the concepts with reference to your professional life, then you're going to have a pretty strong answer. So not much to say here on the grading of answers, because I covered most of it on the last slide. Again, we're looking for incisiveness, thorough reflection using the course material. Does it actually answer the question? Are the theories applicable that you're using? Are the real-life examples that you're using applicable? And then are you adding to the overall discussion in a thought-provoking way? Are you challenging people to think, basically, through your answer? So there's a little bit about logistics I want to talk about when it comes to doing the question and answer part of the CRQE. The way it works basically is that you pose your question in 1 week, and then the question gets answered by your classmates the week after that. And so everything is due on a certain day. I will tell you what that day is at the start of the course, and it changes every semester, so I don't want to give you a day here because these slides apply to any semester. So, but again, the main point is this exercise here with the question and answer is separated over 2 weeks. First comes the question that you pose, and then you will answer somebody else's question a week later, and also pose a new question the same week that you're answering a question from the week prior. Okay. Basically, what this means and what it boils down to is you have a week to take a look at a question and then answer it, which should be plenty of time to do the job. And I will guide you through, the nitty-gritty details of how this gets done in the first 2 or 3 weeks, and by then you'll know exactly what the routine is, and it will be fairly straightforward. The last part of the CRQEs in any given week is the exercise. The exercise gives you an opportunity to look at 2 different leaders and how they've led an organization, and to try to put their leadership style, their values in perspective with all the theories, models, and concepts we discuss in class. Remember, again, a major theme of this course is that there's no one right way to lead people. It depends on the situation you find yourself in, which has multiple dimensions to it. So what we're looking for you to do here is to tell us, when this leadership style and execution makes sense. And typically in the cases you're going to read, it will make sense in the circumstances in which it's presented. And that's why these leaders are profiled, because they've typically done something very well. I think maybe one or two of them is the exact opposite, but most of them are going to profile leaders who have led effectively. So therefore, what you want to do is kind of isolate the circumstances that made this leader effective, and his or her style and execution style effective. So that's really the kind of the directions there. 3 is the most important one, and then you're going to talk about what are the pros and cons of that leadership style. When doesn't it work? Even though it did work in the situation in which they found themselves, when would that not be a good idea? Which is just as important as telling us when it is a good idea. And then give us your personal reflection on whether you like this leadership style and why you like it or don't like it, based on your personal experiences. And that will be a good exercise, rather. So once again, the grading just follows the contours of the assignment requirements. And so if you're talking thoroughly about the advantages and disadvantages of each leader's style and values, that's going to be a good grade. If you are talking about when and why this is an effective leadership style and execution, then that's also part of a good grade. And then also, when is it not effective? Hypothetically, meaning, again, these cases tend to be situations in which the leader was effective, but it's not going to be effective in all situations, and tell us when it wouldn't be. And so if you've done those 3 things, you'll get a good content grade on the exercise. Expression is as usual. This is the scale that I'll be using to grade your CRQE segments. So each segment, the critique, the question, the reflection, the exercise, as you saw on the previous slides, gets 2 grades, an expression grade and a content grade. And so the expression would get a number between 0 and 5, and so would the content for each CRQE. And of course, once you start doing these and getting the grades back, you'll see how this all works. But again, any response you post will simply be graded on a 0 through 5 scale, 5 being excellent, 0 being no answer, and everything in between being varying degrees of good and bad. I thought it would be a good idea to just kind of recap and summarize who is going to see what when you post online on the Engage platform. So what you'll notice going through this list here is that pretty much everything you do is private. The critique, the reflection, the exercise, all private, meaning that only I, the instructor, will see what you are posting. In contrast, the question and answer, when you post your question and then question or questions, and then when you post your answer or answers to the Q&A forums, the whole class will see that. So plan accordingly. Again, it's really up to you what you want to share with me, the instructor, and what you want to share with your classmates. We encourage you to share as much as you're comfortable sharing, but the decision is ultimately yours, and only do what you're comfortable with. And also, again, know who is seeing what when you make these postings, which is the whole purpose of this slide. If any of this is confusing, just let me know, and I will help clear it up for you. So what I wanted to do here in these final few slides, and yes, we are almost done, hooray, was give you a tour of week 1, just as an example for all the weeks that we're going to have in the course. And week 1 is pretty standard, except for one little piece, which I'll get into in a second. And so this will also give you a head start on just going forward with the material for our first week. So this is what you would see on the Engage platform for week 1. It would say, here are your specific assignments. It asks you to read the first 3 chapters in Art and Science of Leadership. Whenever you see ASL, it means Art and Science of Leadership. That's the Nahavandi text. So we're asking you to read the first 3 chapters, which go fairly quickly, actually. One is, a really brief intro, of course, as the first chapter in most texts usually is. And then also we're asking you to read the first 3 chapters in what we're labeling UBFEL, which means Understanding Behaviors for Effective Leadership, which is the Howell-Costley text. Then we're asking you to look at the week 1 narrated PowerPoint files. So you'll have 3 PowerPoints with a narration track similar to this one. The PowerPoints follow the ASL text, the Nahavandi text, because to do both texts would be just too many PowerPoints to follow, and some of the Howell-Costley text overlaps with the Nahavandi anyway, so we only give you PowerPoints for the ASL text. And by the way, I need to mention again, I mentioned this before in a previous slide, that the ASL chapters are the ones that take precedence. If you have to decide about leaving something out, then make sure you cover the ASL chapters first, and then the UBFEL chapters second. So in other words, you can skim or leave out parts of the UBFEL and come back to them later and still have a great experience in this course, and I'll explain why in a second. Okay, so you've read your chapters, you've looked at the narrated PowerPoints, then you do your critique, which we talked about before. And the only thing I'll say here is that, we're telling you, of course, which chapters to critique. It's the ones that you've read and that the PowerPoints have covered for that week. And then you're going to post your critique in the week 1 critique space by our deadline, which is Thursday, or whatever day your instructor tells you, if we wind up changing it. Then you move on to your reflection, and the only thing to tell you here is that we will specifically tell you what to reflect upon, which exercises to do for your self-assessments. And here it tells you, okay, in the ASL text, do your determining LPC scale, which is on page 93, and then in the UBFEL text, do a scale on page 9 called Evaluating Leadership Traits, and another scale on page 38 on Important Leadership Behaviors. What you're going to see is these are going to fluctuate in amount pretty starkly every week, meaning, in week 1 you don't have that many because you're just getting oriented to the course, and we don't want to give you too much in the first week, but I think in week 2 actually it scales pretty high and far, where you're going to do a lot more of these, and then week 3 might be more of the same, and then it'll drop back a little bit later on in the course. So there's nothing really much we can do about making the distribution of these exercises more even, because they tend to go along with the chapter material, and the chapters proceed at their own pace, so that we have to tie the exercises to the chapters, basically. So I do apologize for that in advance, and also kind of warn you in advance that some weeks there'll be a lot of these, some weeks there'll be far less. Week 1 is kind of a slow week with regard to the exercises. Okay, so you do those, you post your reflection, then you move on to your question and answer. Now, in week 1, there's no answer because there's no questions yet for you to answer. In week 2, you will do your first answer. So we've notated that here in the syllabus. And then the other thing to tell you is that you are posting your questions in the Q&A discussion forum for weeks 1 and 2. Make sure you are posting your question and answer in the right forum. We will always tell you exactly which forum it should be. Because if you don't, then it's not going to get read by the right people, meaning your classmates and me, and then your questions won't get answered or even read that week if they're in the wrong place. Okay, so be very, very careful where you're putting your question, where you're putting your answer. Again, all you have to do is follow the guidelines for that week and make sure that you're putting your content in the right forum, and you'll be fine. It really is not that complicated if you just follow the directions. Okay, so for week 1, you pose your question. No need to answer anything. But for week 2, you will answer questions posed in the weeks 1 and 2 forum. And then you move on to your exercise, and we tell you where to read the material for your exercise. Sometimes it will be in the ASL text. Actually, most of the time it's the ASL text. Every now and then I think we throw one in from the UBFEL text. But again, it's always going to be 2 leaders, 2 little vignettes to read. They're short and sweet, and they won't take a lot of time to read, so that you can spend your time instead kind of critiquing and evaluating, comparing, contrasting, etc. Okay, so this is what a typical schedule is going to look like for a week, unless we have a special week like week 4 where there's just an exam, or week 7 where we have an exam and a movie. That's when it changes up a little bit, but pretty much every week is going to look very similar to this. Let me say that I hope you learn a lot from this course. You're going to be exposed to multiple perspectives on leadership theory and practice. You're going to learn about yourself as a leader, and hopefully we're going to kind of broaden your mind about what effective leadership really means and how to do it. That said, if something is not going right for you, whether it's my lectures are not understandable, or you don't understand what to do, or you're not kind of getting as good a grade as you want on your postings, please talk to me. And I'm going to give you all the ways to contact me in the next slide. But I really want this to be a great experience from start to finish, and everybody deserves to have a class they can enjoy and also learn from at the same time. So if that's not happening, let me know, and let me know what I can do to fix it. So where do you go from here? Here are the next steps for you to do as soon as possible. Remember, we've only got 7 weeks, and we've got 7 weeks worth of work to do, so every second counts. First thing, get in touch with me about any questions or concerns you might have. There are 3 ways listed there. I'm fine with any one of those. Whatever works for you, use it. Number 2, get your books if you haven't already. They're absolutely crucial to the completion of the course requirements. They are not just background information. Your CRQEs are based on them. You cannot do them without having your books in hand. So if you don't have your books yet, drop everything and get them. And then also, if it's week 1 already and you don't have them, I suggest getting an e-copy of the book to put on your Kindle or Nook if you have one of those, because it'll save shipping time. We really have to get them. You really need to get them in hand and get the work done on time so that we can move forward as a class together in sync with the schedule. And then, of course, the last thing is do actually start working on that first round of CRQEs, the ones that we covered right here in the slides and also in your syllabus and that are posted on the Engage platform. Okay, so start doing your critique, your first reflection, your first question, and your first exercise, and you'll be well on your way to having a great experience in this course. And again, get in touch if anything is unclear. I look forward to hearing from you.